Today's lesson is definitely one of my favorites because of this aim right here that we have. It says Kipsters will be able to replace variables with numbers to make arguments. A lot of people think you can't argue stuff in math. That is not true at all. Math is all about argumentation. It's one of the best things you can argue because you can almost always find a clear-cut winner to the argument, which makes it great, which is maybe different from history and other things you study where you don't always have one clear winner. So let's see if we can find something. Let's see if we can replace variables with numbers and make some arguments. We have two characters making arguments today. We have Mr. Arangelo and Mr. Lamangelo. You might see those names and think, oh, those are kind of silly, and if you think that, well, they are kind of silly. I made them up. So we have Arangelo and Lamangelo, and they're debating a couple of math ideas today. They're going to need our help to figure out who's correct and who is incorrect. So let's look at argument 1. So go ahead and track along the page with me, and let's see what they say. It says, Lamangelo says you can subtract numbers in whatever order you want, and says A minus B is the same thing as B minus A. Arangelo says this is never true, and then you have to be careful of the order when subtracting. So he says A minus B is not the same thing as B minus A. That's what that little symbol means. A minus B is not the same thing as B minus A. So who is correct, and explain your reasoning and include examples. So our goal today is to use our writer's CFS to think about this as deeply as we can and then write about it as best we can. So first, let's think about the task. We need to identify the task and then respond with complete sentences. So the task is, the question is asking me to, well, what's it asking me to do? Look back through it, find a question mark or some other things, and it says, who is correct? Explain your reason and include examples. So it's asking me to explain who is correct and then use what to explain? Use examples to explain. So let's see if we know some facts. So if I go back to my problem, I know that Mr. Lamangelo, he says this fact right here. He says order isn't important when subtracting. So he says A minus B equals B minus A. That's what he says. So he says order isn't important. Meanwhile, Arangelo says this is to be true. He says A minus B is not the same thing as B minus A. They're not the same thing. So he says order is important. I haven't done any thinking yet about this problem. All I've done is I've taken some facts, I've written them down, and I've figured out what it wants me to do. Now let's start thinking about it. So yesterday we talked about how we can change any of these letters to numbers if we want. So let's try it to see who's true. So let's say, let's let A equal 2. Let's define A as 2. And let's let B equal 3. And let's see what happens. So I have A take away B and B take away A. So remember, we said let A equal 2. So that's important. Let A equal 2. So that means I'm going to write 2 in place of the A for both of them. Taking away 2. But then we also said let B be 3. So what is B? B is 3. Let's start to think about this. B is 3. Now Lamangelo said these are the same. Arangelo said no, they're not equal. Let's see who we agree with. A minus B or 2 minus 3. 2 minus 3. If I think about a number line, that's going to make me end up at -1. 3 minus 2, that's going to cause me to end up, well, 3, take away 2. If I've got $3, I take 2 away, I end up with $1. Not the same thing as this. If you have $2 and you spend 3, you're going to owe somebody some money. So -1 is equal to 1. That's not true. That's not true. So who's correct? The guy who says they're not the same or the guy who says they are the same? What I want you to do is see if you can think about this. Who's correct? Who's incorrect? Go down here, try to publish your response. And I would only spend about a minute trying and then come back and see how I do it, because this is just our first example today. All right, so let's actually think about this. So we should start by just stating some facts. So think about the facts we know. We know Lamangelo says that order is not important. And Orangelo says it is important. Maybe we should add something in about it is important when subtracting. They're both talking about subtraction. So order is not important when subtracting. So, but we said if we let A equal 2 and let B equal 3, if we change those numbers, we can prove this, right? Then we can see who's correct. So we can prove Lamangelo, who says A take away B is equal to B minus A. Then we have Orangelo, who says A take away B not the same thing as B take away A. Lamangelo, let's try you out. 2 minus 3. He says that's the same thing as 3 minus 2. Well, Orangelo, we would see that you are wrong because that's not true. But we can see Orangelo is right. He says A minus B. We said that's 2 minus 3. B minus A, that's 3 minus 2. So Orangelo is saying -1 is not the same thing as 1. So who's correct? The person who says they're the same number? Or the person who says they're not the same number? They can be seen from the equations. These aren't models. That when A is 2 and B is 3, blank's equation is true. Whose equation is true? -1 is not the same as 1, or -1 is the same as 1. This is the true one. So Orangelo's equation is true. Therefore, when subtracting, what can we say? Therefore, when subtracting, order is important. It's very important. It's huge. Order is totally important. Nice. So we've got that one taken care of. Let's go on to the next one. So argument 2. Argument 2. Here's what I want you to think about. The question's asking you the same thing. It's asking me to explain who is correct and to explain using examples. I want you to write this down for Orangelo and Lamangelo. I want you to tell me what you know about each one and see if you can start to think about how you feel about each person's statement. So read through it on your own, write down the facts you know about each person, and see what you can do. Okay, so I'm back from your pausing. In our problem, it had said that Orangelo was saying that we can add a number to 0, it's still the same number. So he says G plus 0 is equal to G. So this is Orangelo. He says G plus 0 equals G. Meanwhile, Lamangelo disagrees. He disagrees. He says any number added to 0 is 0. So he says G plus 0 is 0. Well, in order to prove if these guys are true or not, let's define what G is. So let's say let G equal 4. So let's try this and see what happens. G plus 0 equals G. Okay. Well, G is now 4. 4 plus 0 equals 4. Over here, 4 plus 0 equals 0. Who's correct? Obviously, Lamangelo is the correct one. 4 plus 0 is 4. 4 does equal 4. Over here, 4 plus 0 is 4. 4 does not equal 0. So Lamangelo, you are not correct. Orangelo, you are correct. So that's how we can start to say this. That's how we can start to publish this. So we can say, Lamangelo says G plus 0 is always G. It's always that number you had. Orangelo says that that's not true. If you add 0, it's going to be 0. So, but if we let G equal 4, and we only have one variable, so we don't need to define that, then it can be seen who's correct. So we can include this down in our evidence. I can say, here's Orangelo's answer. Here's Lamangelo's. He had G plus 0 equal to G, which is the same thing as 4 plus 0 equals 4. Or over here, I can see Lamangelo said something wrong. He said if I take 4 plus 0, it's going to equal 0. No, sir, it's equal to 4. So not correct. Correct. So it can be seen from the, is this a model? Not exactly. It can be seen from the equations that when G is 4, Orangelo's equation or statement is true. Therefore, when you add 0 to a number, what happens? The number stays the same.